Thank you, Prajwal. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarva dharmaswarupine avatar varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Sruti smriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam shankaram lokashankaram. So in the first session on the Gita, the commentary on the Gita, we discussed a few important points that the commentator Shankaracharya mentions in his introduction, which is called in Sanskrit Ubodhgata. The purpose of divine incarnation, the twofold Vedic traditions, civilizations, the purpose of divine incarnation is stated that is, whenever there is an increase in evil tendencies, in negative tendencies in our culture or tradition or civilization, there is this inevitable descent of the self, the Atman, in the form of a divine human being to bring back dharma and to save humanity from negative tendencies and negative personalities. In fact, that is also mentioned here. You find in the Puranic stories, you find every time when Vishnu took an incarnation, he often made sure that he left this earth clean of all, not only evil tendencies, but also evil personalities. So mythological stories you find. And then, of course, these twofold civilizations. This is one of the unique contributions of Shankaracharya, which he mentioned in the introduction. That is, fundamentally, there are two tendencies in human civilizations which shaped human civilization. One tendency is natural for everyone. We want to make wealth, we want to become prosperous, we want to be powerful, and also we want to play by the book. We want to formulate some rules and regulations for equal distribution of wealth, orderliness. Equal abhyudaya means artha and kama regulated by dharma. Dharma here means a regulating principle that is necessary for all civilizations to enjoy the fruits of science and technology, the natural resources, and so on. It's called abhyudaya. It's called the pravritti lakshana, means the one natural tendency of people with this impulse, civilizational impulse, is they'll be very active. They want to do great things, they want to achieve great things, they want to accomplish great things, and they want to live a happy life. Nothing wrong in it. So this is the natural tendency of 99.99% of humanity everywhere. Then there is a small, tiny fragment, a small, tiny percentage of human beings. They would say, well, we don't want these wealth and status and power and money, everything. Like Buddha, he said that, well, I don't want to live in this palace. I don't want to enjoy this kingdom. I want to go away somewhere and sit under a tree to find out the meaning of human existence and human life. It's called nivritti lakshana. It means nivritti lakshana. Nivritti lakshana means withdrawing from the worldly desires, from the world of worldly desires and empirical aspirations. Very small, tiny people. But you find that most of the great contributions of these great these great transcendental people who care for higher transcendental values, you can include among them men like Christ, Buddha, Shankara, Sri Ramakrishna, and so on. Many great men and women who in so many ways have made great contribution to mysticism, to this inquiry into the essence of or the meaning of human life and existence, who didn't care for anything else. A small, tiny percentage of humanity. In fact, their contribution is the foundation of all that is eternal in this unfoldment of the unfoldment drama of human civilization. If you look at the entire history of humanity, whom do we remember? We don't so much remember a man like Hannibal or maybe Alexander the Great, except for he was a great military strategist, military tactician, Napoleon Bonaparte. We remember them as great heroes, but we don't think that their contribution made an eternal and immortal impression on the civilization of humanity. Even without them, we would not have lost anything. We would not have missed anything. But think of this world without a man like Christ or Buddha. Well, not too many of them, just a few. But think of this world without a man like Christ or Buddha or a Shankara or Siddhartha. Without a Shankara, we would not be discussing this Vedanta, this important text here right now. And without Christ, we won't be talking about a heart or maybe we won't be talking about some of the greatest art forms, music forms, which enriched European civilization because of the Roman Catholic Church, which again would not have existed without a Christ. So you can imagine these great men, it's called Nivritti Lakshana. In the Gita tradition, 4 great men are mentioned here. Sanaga, Sanatana, Sanatana, Sanat Kumar, and so on. 4 of them. But I'm giving an example. As a Nivritti Lakshana means, Sreya means those who always focus on some of the highest, most sublime transcendental values that enriched, that shaped human civilization. It's called twofold Vedic religion. This is another important point that he makes his introduction. And then another important observation that Shankaracharya makes in his introduction is this Gita is the condensation of the entire Vedic heritage, Vedic teachings called Samasta Vedartha Sara Sangraha Bhudam. The condensation, the essence, the summary of all that is stated in the Upanishads or any other Vedantic canonical literature. All you find in condensed form in this text. The 4th point is, that's very important. All of us can take to spiritual life. We don't have to go anywhere. Only we should live a good life. We should become good human beings. We should do our duties and perform our responsibility with a sense of sanctity and sacredness and without selfish motive, which he called yajna or karma yoga. So if we do our work without going to any temple or a church, without praying to God even, if you are a housewife, professional, doctor, engineer, whatever may be your job, do that work with total dedication, with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, offering this work, whatever you're doing, as a flower that you place at the altar of the Lord. That is karma yoga. And that will gradually make your mind pure. And when your mind is pure, the purity will naturally lead to the highest spiritual enlightenment. These 2 important principles. Karma yoga leading to jnana prapti, that leads to emancipation or enlightenment. From karma yoga to jnana prapti and then to moksha, means enlightenment. Karma nishthayaha chitta suddhidvarena purushartha heduttam na swadandrena jnana nisthatu swadandrena purushartha hetuhu anyan apeksha. Which means whatever we are doing right now, you may be farmer, engineer, factory worker, whatever may be, make it a karma yoga. By doing that with total sincerity and application and enthusiasm, but without a selfish motive, which means non-attachment. And then it becomes karma yoga. That leads to gradual purification of the mind, because mind will be purified, cleansed of all desires and negative impulses. And that leads to emancipation, which later Buddha called nirvana. And then the last statement that comes in the introduction is, this is the message that Lord Krishna gave to humanity. Lord Krishna's gift to humanity, spiritual gift to humanity, is this message which he conveyed through the medium of Arjuna, his disciple. This is an important thing. And there's an interesting story, interesting description, explanation as to why Krishna chose Arjuna as his disciple. According to Madhusudana Saraswati, some other commentators, they make three observations in the commentary. They say, there were 5 brothers, the Pandavas. Yudhishthira, who was a philosopher, a learned man, but won't do anything. He knew everything, and finally he decided to do nothing. That is Yudhishthira. So Krishna kept a long distance from him, because this man is as good as useless. He knew everything. But if you read Mahabharata, you don't want an elder brother like Yudhishthira. And no mother would like to have a son like Yudhishthira, because Kunti herself became, in some respects, almost point of this, admonishing him. So Yudhishthira was the senior most of the Pandavas. Bhima was more a man of brawn than of brain. He was a muscular man, a strong man who believed in what we call only in action. So he was not much given to philosophy. So Krishna didn't choose him as a disciple. Then there were the 4th and 5th, Nagula and Sakadeva. They were children. So Krishna naturally didn't choose them as disciples. Arjuna was chosen. Why? Because Arjuna was a man of action, but he also was a man of intellect. So because he was a man of intellect, he felt a lot of conflicts. Is it appropriate? Is it proper for me to do my duty? What will be the consequences? I will become a sinner. So should I do my work or not? How should I do? So Arjuna was in a kind of conflict. Now that's why a creative conflict is sometimes a springboard to higher evolution, higher achievement in life. So Arjuna was facing a big conflict in his mind. And Krishna knew his character. He had some doubts. If somebody could clear his doubts, then Arjuna certainly would do the right thing. So Arjuna was the right man, the right recipient, the right disciple who can understand the teaching. So Krishna chose Arjuna as a disciple. This is the essence. Now next, what I'm trying to do is to give a flashlight into some of the wonderful portions of this commentary, Shankaracharya's commentary on the Gita. It's called Gita Bhashyam, it is called. Remember, this book has been commented upon by so many great scholars and saints. After Shankara, Ramanuja came, Madhvacharya came, Vallabha came, and in Sri Chaitanya tradition, later, of course, many Advaitins and non-Advaitins, Gurartha-Deepika is a great work by Madhusudana. So, and then many, in fact, Sridharacharya wrote a small Tiga, and then many, Shankarananda Saraswati, many others wrote. In fact, 18 commentaries are available in 2 volumes, brought out by Dharma Prakash, which I've got a copy of. So now I'm going to bring out some important flashlights in this Gita, which shows the genius of the commentator. One important commentary is important because it clears a very important conflict in the minds of many people who have wrong notions about Hinduism and Hindu religion or Hindu society. Now the verse is 13, the verse in the 4th chapter. I think it comes in the 4th chapter of the Gita. Chadurvarnim maya sustam guna karma vibhagasaka tasya kartaram abhima vidhi akartaram avvaya. This is the verse. What it essentially tells you is this. The Varnasama Dharma, a four-fold division of humanity into 4 different categories based on 4 different temperaments and tendencies and preferences or attitudes. This is my creation. This is part of my creation. This is my scheme, my plan. I am the one who activated this, who put in place this plan. And also, I am the one who can undo this. This is a simple verse. Now, its commentary is very famous, very profound, because it tells you something about a social institution which later degenerated into what now we understand as casteism. Shankaracharya says in his commentary, this division is based on the fundamental impulses, temperaments, attitudes, preferences, cultural, intellectual, and spiritual characteristics of people. Those who have got what we call sattvic qualities, means those who are shama, dhamma, etc., self-restrained, self-control, a sense of moderation, given to contemplation and meditation. Well, all the genuine, great spiritual aspirants belong to this category. I mean, they are certainly capable of doing great things, but they think, well, action is necessary, but action alone is not enough. We have to think of word action stops, because action cannot alone bring happiness and peace. And so they have a lot of sattva guna and some rajoguna. Such people are called brahmanas. So remember, birth is not mentioned here. It's not like the division of classes in British society. Still, you know, those are given great contribution, great services to the king, would be elevated to given peerage, or maybe given knighthood. And the successors also will inherit a big manor with a big estates which go along with this elevation in society. So once somebody may be called a lord or viscount, or maybe a knight, be sir. And along with that, the state, the king, the monarch may also hand over some castles and maybe properties and estates, which become the hereditary property of the peerage of the particular decorated person, who may make great contribution, so may become members of the House of Lords and so on, which they no want to demolish, of course, abolish for God's sake. Now, the point is, this is something, and it's hereditary. Now, here what it means is, in the same family, the elder brother wants, it tells his father, well, I don't want to run your business. You close down your shop. I'm going to forest, or I'm going to study philosophy, or I'm going to study theology. That person will be Brahmin. And if his younger brother joins the army, join the special forces, he may become a Kshatriya. And still another brother or relative takes to trade and business. He may start an IT company. He may become a Vaishya. If another person, no, I would rather do some little work. I don't want to go to schools and colleges. I don't care for contemplation. I don't worry about God or religion or anything, spirituality. That person will be called a Shudra. This is what Shankaracharya himself writes. But the whole thing has been completely distorted. Completely misrepresented and misinterpreted. So you find this is what Chadurvarnim Chattwaraha Eva Varnaham Chadurvarnim Maya Isurena System Utpadidam, etc. Then he says Gunavibhagasho Gunavibhagashaha Karma Vibhagashaha Cha Gunakarma vibhagascha gunaha sattva rajas tamamsi. What are human temperaments and characteristics? Sattva guna, as I mentioned earlier. Suppose you are of a contemplative type of person who rather read somewhere, reading the Sermon on the Mount or praying in a church or a temple, won't care to do business. And even if the father tells him, I'm going to put all the money in your name, he says, no, I don't want that. I would rather be happy praying somewhere. That person is a Brahmana. That's the idea behind. He has got some fraction of the Rajoguna because he's capable of doing great things. So that is why it is said, Shankaracharya will say, in fact, there is another commentary which says, Madhusudana was a great commentator, was a close follower and admirer of Shankaracharya. He lived in 16th century, and incidentally, he is considered to be one of the greatest dialecticians during the post-Shankarite times. He wrote the well-known book Advaita Siddhi, which can roughly be compared to Kant's critique of pure reason in German philosophy. Madhusudana's Advaita Siddhi, 16th century. So he says, Sattopasarjana Rajapradhanaha Kshatriya. Who are Kshatriyas? They have got Sattva Guna, but their the leading temperament tendency is to be active, to accomplish great things, more or less the physical level. And who is a Brahmana? Madhusudana says, Guna karma vibhagasya, guna vibhagasya, karma vibhagasya, tathahi sattva pradhana brahmanaha, tesham cha sattvigani shamadhamadini karmani. Shama, Dhamma, Uparadi, Tidiksha, Siddha, Samadhan is called. Samadhi Satka Sampatti means self-restraint, mental restraint, restraining the senses. If our eyes go for the wrong types of things to see, you turn away from that. If you hear things which are not good for us or for others, you go away from there, you withdraw, you don't listen to those things. If somebody asks you to do something that is unpleasant, that's wrong, you naturally revolt, you just withdraw yourself, you go away, you don't listen to that person. So these are the characteristics, means self-restraint, self-control, and the ability to detect what is right and what is wrong. Now, that is the characteristic of Sattva Guna. Naturally endued with the quality, like contemplativeness, tendency to contemplate. The person may not react impulsively. If he may listen, and then he will think, then he will react. This is a characteristic of those who are endued with Sattva Guna. They are Sattva Guna Pradhana. They have got Sattva Guna as their predominant tendency, but they are also capable of action. It's called so Sattva Pradhanaha. Tesham Sattvigani Samadhavadani Karmani. Again, Kshatriya, Sattva Upasarjana Rajapradhanaha Kshatriya. Sattva Upasarjana Rajapradhanaha. They have a lot of Sattva Guna, but the main predominant, dominating tendency is action, achievement, getting things done at any cost. Tesham cha tadrishani sauri tejaha prabhudini karmani. It means for those who join the military forces, the army and so on, naturally they have all this physical courage and things like that. Now, here is a very scientific, very rational, psychologically very comprehensive categorization of humanity based on their temperaments. And then, who are Vaishyas? The third group. Tama Upasarjana Raja Pradhanaha Vaishyaha. So, they have got a combination of Tamo Guna and Rajo Guna, active, but they don't care much for higher philosophy or contemplation. So, they are Vaishyaha. Tesham cha Krishi Adini, mostly those who trade, those who take to trade in making business achievement. Nothing wrong in it. Remember, none of these activities are condemned or considered inferior, superior. In fact, Udara, the Lord Krishna says in the Gita, all these people are equally broad-minded, evolved. At the same time, among them, among humanity, there is the scope for everyone to climb up the ladder, to evolve further. So everyone can become a Brahmana or a Kshatriya or Vaishya or Shudra. It's our own choice. The whole world is the platform. Whatever we want to do on the platform, we can do. So very scientific interpretation. Now, you know why this portion of the Gita commentary is important. People don't read these things. And they will say Shankaracharya was the one who made all the casteism. Even everywhere I found this. It is something very funny, you know. It happens everywhere. But Bhashyakara makes it very clear. So scientific. He doesn't consider any group as inferior or superior. Everyone has a tendency. The point is, but there is an encouragement that everyone, along with trade, along with commerce, along with activity, you should also try to practice some contemplation so that you can become more and more evolved in spiritual. Everyone can become a Christ or a Buddha. That's what it essentially means. Any person, if she wants, can become a Christ or a Buddha, because they are the archetypal embodiments, examples of this Brahmana. I mean, those who are endowed with Sattvagunas. So the commentator writes very, very forcefully. He says, Gunascha karmanicha idi gunakarma dundegavad bhava. It's actually from another one, Nilakanda, is another commentary. So they mean to say, Bhashyakara himself says, Tama upasarjana reja pradhanasya vaishesya krishyadini karmani reja upasarjana tama pradhanasya shuddhasya sususha eva karma itevam guna karma vibhaga shaka chadu varnim maya srishtam. This is a natural consequence of plurality, diversity in human temperaments. A very scientific description of human. And then everyone can and should try to evolve further. In fact, there is this scope for higher evolution that is implied here. You can evolve further, evolution at another level. Evolution, not at a physical level, but evolution at the level of values, evolution at the level of tendencies, impressions, feelings, attitudes, and so on. Anyone, everyone can try to evolve. So in the same family, among our own friends, you find all this. So some of them are more evolved, some of them are given to contemplation, some of them are more given to action, some of them would rather won't go for anything on a big scale, they would rather do their daily duty, and so on you find. So it is not, remember, these temperaments were not created by Krishna, but Krishna is trying to analyze and observe this diversity of human temperaments and tries to give an analysis with an encouragement in the succeeding chapters that everyone should and must try to evolve further. Everyone should strive to become Brahmins. In fact, there is a statement in Swami Vivekananda's complete books. Brahmanization is our goal. That's a statement. Making everyone in this humanity 8 billion Brahmins, there will be no problem in this world. You can imagine. If the entire population of 8 billion become Brahmins, that there will be no need of a UNESCO, there will be no need of NATO or any of these different army, military alliances, nothing the kind. That's what Vivekananda said. Sometimes in his oratorial flourish, sometimes he makes some statements which in a way have a great significance. Brahmanization is our goal. That's from Vivekananda. Means everyone should strive to endure this higher sattva gunas. I don't think there is anything wrong if the world is inhabited by 8 billion Jesus Christ. I don't think there'd be a problem in this world, or a Buddha. Nothing wrong in it. That's what Swamiji actually implies here. So this is one part of it. Then you can see this commentary is also full of very interesting imageries. It's so poetical. And to establish, to explain a deep philosophical problem, here Shankaracharya uses very interesting examples, imageries, metaphors from our everyday life. Now, there is a verse, let's see, I think it comes maybe in the 18th verse, perhaps, I think, let me see, 18th verse of the Gita, of 4th chapter. Karmani akarmaya pashet akarmani cha karmayeha sabuddhiman manisheshu sayukta krishna karma. This is the verse, I think the 18th verse of the 4th chapter. Now, anyone who just reads the literal translation of this verse will be completely confused, absolutely confused. Every sincere reader. You won't be able to make head or tail of this. Because it says, the one who sees inaction in action, and action in inaction, is intelligent among human beings, is a yogi, and is a doer of all actions. This is the literal translation. So, karmani means in action. Akarmaya pasyami, the one who sees karma in action. So you should be able to see inaction in action and action in inaction. You should be able to see action in action, and you should be able to see inaction in action. So karmani akarmaya pasya. Karmani akarma means you should be able to see akarma, inaction, inaction, and akarmani is a karmayaka, and you should be able to see action in inaction. So seeing inaction in action and seeing action in inaction, totally confusing. This is the verse. Now, the meaning is simple. Once we understand the meaning, then the commentary and the imageries, the examples, which become very vivid. The point is, normally when we do things, different activities, when we involve ourselves in many kinds of activities, we think, well, I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm traveling, and so on. So we use the word I. So when we use the word I, we are identifying ourselves with the person who is going to an airport, taking a plane and travels. Now, who is actually the person traveling? According to Vedanta, it is only the body and the senses, not Atman. Atman doesn't travel anywhere. So when we identify ourselves with our mind, body complex and the senses, mind, body, senses, this complex, when we say I'm doing this, the I here stands for body, mind, complex, I. So I'm doing this. So, but actually, according to Vedanta, the real I is Atman, not the mind, not the body, not the intellect. The real I is Atman. And Atman doesn't go to the airport, take a plane, go to New York. Atman doesn't do that. We do that, the human being. Human beings in this body, mind, complex, senses are involved. So the real I doesn't travel. So in the so-called action, you can see inaction. When you identify yourself with Atman, you can say, while doing all this, you can say, I'm not doing anything. So in action, it is possible for you to see inaction. So in action, it is possible for you to see inaction when you identify yourself with Atman, and Atman doesn't get involved in anything. It is only the senses, body, mind complex that get involved in actions. So I'm not doing anything because I'm the Atman. Atman is beyond action, inaction equation. So when even in action, it is possible for you to see in action. And in action, you can see, you should see action. What does it mean? In inaction, you should see action. Actually, there is no inaction because inaction is conceivable only when there is a possibility of action. There is no action, so there cannot be inaction. There is no action, so there is no absence of action. Inaction means absence of action. If there is no action, there cannot be absence of action either. So what does it mean? Now, but people often misunderstand like this. So karmani karma kriyadidi vyapara matram tasmin karmani akarma karma bhavam yapashit akarmani cha karma bhave kartutantratvad. I mean, so kartutantra means something relative, something not in the absolute sense. Vastutantra and kartrutantra. That it's at a relative plane, you can say I'm doing that, etc. But when you try to assert, no, I am not this body-mind complex, I'm Atman, then you don't say I'm doing anything or I'm doing nothing. You are neither doing anything nor are you inactive. So action, inaction equation is understandable only at the empirical plane, at the relative plane. Pravritti nivrityoho vastu aprapya eva hi sarva eva kriyakaragadi vyavakaraga avidya bhumo eva. So all these actions are linked to avidya, our ignorance of our true nature. We are ignorant of the fact that we are Atman. So we wrongly identify ourselves with the body-mind complex. So avidya bhumi means at the plane, at the level of avidya, ignorance. So at that level, we say I'm doing things, or rather I'm not doing anything. Both these statements are related to vyavahara matram, means vyapara matram, that is avidya bhumo, at the level of ignorance. Karmaya pasyati sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukto yogi krishna karma samasta karma krut cha sayidi stuyede karma karmanohu idredarshi. So the idea is, now the point is, this is clear. Now here this debate, there's a debate going on. What is the debate? The debate is interesting. The debate is this. This is absolute gibberish. That's the opposite party, the opposing school of philosophy. They tell you, Nanukimidam viruddham uchyade karmani akarmayapasya idi akarmani cha karma idi nahi karma akarmasya akarma va karma tatra viruddham kadam pasyed drashtra. So how can karma become akarma? How can action become inaction? How can you see inaction in action, inaction in inaction? Karmani akarma yapasya. Karmani akarma yapasya. How can you see akarma in karma? Akarmani cha karma. How can you see karma in akarma? How is it possible? So this is absolutely wrong. There is no justification for this statement. Now, here, of course, I want to read a very interesting part of it. Giving an example. So I'm just choosing one small fraction of this. There is an interesting imagery given here. It's related to traveling, moving in a boat in the middle of the river. That's an interesting imagery gives. So here, at the end of his long opposition, the objector says, Nanu karma eva sarvesham na kochit vyabhijarati. It says, karma eva. Action is always action. It doesn't change. And inaction is always inaction. It doesn't change. You cannot see action in inaction and inaction in action. It is absolutely impossible. Whatever we see, it is there in front of us. Whatever we see is real. Whatever we see or we perceive using our five senses and mind is as such. It is nothing different from what we see. This is the view of the opposing school of philosophy. Most probably Mimamsakas. So Mimamsakas have a lot of things to say. Nanu kim idam viruddham uchchide karmani akarmaya pasyedi agarmani cha karmayidi. Viruddham is something totally mutually contradictory. It's a mutual contradiction that you are talking about. Then Shankaracharya says, he gives a very interesting example. No. What you see may not be always true. What you see and think in your mind, it may not be always true. It can be just the opposite of the reality, the real thing. He gives an example. The example is this. Suppose you're traveling in a boat. Naustasya navigachandyam tadasteshu agadeshu nageshu pratigulagadi darshana dureshu chachusha asannikristeshu gachatsu gatyabhava darshana, etc. It goes very interesting. Read later. So the example is given from this illustration. Somebody is traveling in a boat, moving forward. So the boat is moving forward. Now, as the boat is moving forward, a traveler sitting in the boat may feel that the objects on the river bank, close to the river bank, not far away, close to the river bank is moving in the opposite direction. This is what we see. This is what our eyes see. Our eyes perceive. So you are moving in a boat to the north, and there are trees on the banks of the river, close to the boat. You feel that they are moving to the south. Okay, this is one that everyone can understand. Now, on the other hand, suppose you see some distant objects, let's say houses several miles away, maybe, or maybe hills several miles away from the river. You don't feel they are moving. No, they are not moving. But I'd say again, when you look at the sky, the stars and moonlight, you feel they are sitting there all the time. You may have traveled maybe 50 miles along the river in the boat, still you feel the same moon, the same stars in the sky. They are remaining there all the time. There is no change. So what we see very often may not be the real thing. If our eyes can deceive us. Similarly, in this world, when we do things thinking that we are this body-mind complex, then we feel we are doing a lot of things, we are involved in a lot of activities. But in reality, the truth is that what we see may not be the real thing. As we evolve in our spiritual life, our own definition, our own interpretation of what we are, what we actually are, can change. Our own reading of our own personality, our own definition of our own personality, our purpose can evolve, can change as we evolve in spiritual life, and also even in intellectual life, in cultural life. We find that our our tendencies, impressions, our own understanding of what we are also change. So here, see, for example, you can see this even while when you're traveling by train. Suppose when the train is moving forward, and in the railway track nearby, it's not train is not moving, but you feel the train in the nearby track, which is actually not moving, you feel it's moving backward, the opposite direction. Again, when we are sitting in a train which is not moving, and the nearby track, a train is actually moving, we feel we are moving the opposite direction. So we are not moving. If we understand that we have not moved at all, only when the train has passed, then we feel we are still on the same track, in the same station. So what it means, this example is taken. So as we evolve, as we move forward in our own spiritual evolution, our understanding of what we are will change. And at the spiritual level, as we move forward, as we evolve forward, what happens is our own understanding of what our true nature will also change. At the beginning, a child may think, well, I'm a person who wants to enjoy sweets or wants to play. And again, as you evolve, when you become a young person, you'll be aspiring for getting a job. You won't be going for sweets or chocolates. And again, when you become an aged person, then at least fortunately, there are many cases where people become more mature in their intellectual abilities with age. They would like to read maybe Aristotle, or they may read the Bible. They may be reading things which may not necessarily bring a few extra dollars. So our own intellect evolves, become more mature. Our own interpretation, definition of our own personality will change. So you can find many such interesting imageries in this. These ideas are mentioned just to give an example, a flashlight of the greatness of this commentary. I can also quote, before we conclude, another very important, just I will touch and we'll continue this discussion later. The 18th chapter again, there is a verse which can be very confusing. I have found many people giving terrible interpretations of Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Praja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyo Mokshashyami Ma Shucha. This is the verse. So it actually means you give up all dharmas and then you take refuge in me. I shall save you from all sins. Don't worry, grieve not. This is the essence. In short, roughly this is the translation. 66th verse of the 18th chapter. Now what it means is if you read the commentary, without the commentary, it can be totally confusing. Sarva Dharman Paridija literally means you give up all dharmas. Does it mean that you should practice adharma? But there are people who interpret that way. So if you read the commentary, you will understand. Sarva Dharman Paridija means give up all actions with ambitions and desire. Another interpretation, give up the very idea of what is right and wrong, because when you get established in your highest spiritual enlightenment, there is no need for you to keep in mind that you should not do any adharma, because you'll be naturally doing only dharma. That's the idea behind it. When a person gets established in the highest spiritual realization, he becomes naturally endowed with a tendency, with an intuitive tendency to do only the right thing, to stick to dharma, satya, truthfulness, righteousness, all these values. So when a person actually takes refuge in God, what he does is, he is allowing his own mind to be filled with God's will. It's almost like filling a glass with milk. If the cup or glass, if the cup is empty, completely empty, and we pour milk, you can get a cup full of milk. But suppose the cup has got some water already in it, and then you pour milk, you won't get 100% milk, maybe 90%. Like that, when a person totally empties his own mind, in some ways there are some ideas in Christian theology related to this kind of total surrender. Anyway, that's a different subject we'll discuss later. So this idea of total surrender, where you close the bargain, you fill your own mind with divine tendencies, divine attributes. So you become naturally established in dharma or in all other spiritual qualities. So you don't even need to discriminate between right and wrong, because you'll be intuitively doing, instinctively you'll be doing only the right thing. So this verse has got many, many interpretations. We'll discuss in the next session. You are most welcome to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. First hand up is David's.
Hello, Swami.
Most welcome.
I had a question about Shankara. He later commentators came and very ardently denounced what he said. On the other hand, like Ramanuja, etc., do they at least recognize the greatness of Shankara because he was the one who discovered the Gita, or do they just denounce him completely?
I think they did not denounce the way we understand today. There are two levels of recognizing or not recognizing. One is, of course, the Sanskrit language is in a way sampradayika, means there were different denominations, schools of thoughts. For example, those who claim to be the followers of Ramanuja, you can find where this kind of sacred thread, this sandal paste mark you find. All of them may not have read Ramanuja, but still, because they belong to that group of cult that belongs to Ramanuja, they may not accept Shankaracharya, not because they have read Shankaracharya. So that is always there. This is one level. Another level, there are those who actually have read both. They never denounce Shankaracharya the way we probably may fear, not at all, never. But they opposed the idea of Advaita. Advaita was frequently criticized because, I tell you, it due to some historical reasons. In Shankaracharya's life and his works, you find the most sublime devotional poem, devotional poetry is the writing of Shankara. Ramanuja, Madhva, even Chaitanya, none of them could write anything comparable to any of the 68 poetical, devotional poetry of Shankaracharya. None of them could write anything comparable to that. So, and again, it was Shankaracharya who actually said only the highest devotee can be highest bhakta. But what happened, from 9th century onwards, there was a turn of events which actually led to the emergence of opposing commentators like Ramanuja and Madhva. That's because the devotional element of Shankaracharya's works took a back seat, because a lot of post-Shankarite writers, they overemphasize the dialectical aspect of Advaita, the dialectical, the polemical aspect of Advaita. That was not Shankaracharya's fault. So Ramanuja actually arose as a revolt against this tendency of not giving proper, even enough importance to the devotional elements of Shankaracharya's works. See, Ramanuja's guru, Yamunacharya. In fact, the Ramanuja tradition, there were great Advaitins who Ramanuja's teachers. Ramanuja actually, there was a scene in Ramanuja's life. He started shedding tears when his teacher was explaining one part of Shankara's Bhashya, which he was learning. So immediately Ramanuja left and he he became, he gradually evolved his own system of thought. So in Chandogya Upanishad, there is a mantra which was being explained by his guru, who was an Advaitin, and Ramanuja didn't like it. The same thing happened to Madhva later. So you often find that overemphasis on the dialectical aspects of Shankaracharya's philosophy, totally neglecting the devotional elements in them, which actually led to the emergence of the opposing schools. So you don't find a lot of dialectical warfare focusing on the devotional points. You find the dialectical warfare mostly focusing on the dry philosophical elements. The conflicts were only at the dialectical level. None of them ever referred to the great devotional poetry that is Shankaracharya's contribution, or the great temples that he revived and so on. So that's an interesting part of it. That's partly because of historical reason. So one important thing, there were two books, two well-known, in fact, three actually. Padmapada's Panchapadika, and the next book was Panchapadika Vivarana by Prakashar Medi, one school. Then Sureshwaracharya, another disciple of Shankara, wrote Brihadaranya Upanishad Bhashya Vartikam, a super commentary on Shankaracharya's commentary on Brihadaranya Upanishad. Must be a huge work, practical work. Then another one was Vajaspati Misra's Bhamati, which is a very, very dialectical work. Extremely, you can find a lot of arguments. I mean, this threadbare arguments you find. Vajaspati Misra, Bhamati. So these three books had already become popular among scholars before Ramanuja entered the scene in around 12th century, 11th, 12th century. So that means it took almost 400 years for these opposing philosophers to emerge. And they have enough justification, because in the name of Shankaracharya, a lot of dialectical works were becoming popular among scholars. Again, Sureshwara's books, Brihadaranya Upanishad Bhashya Vartikam, Vajaspati Misra was an elder contemporary of Shankara, who's almost, he must have lived, must have been born a few years after Shankaracharya's Samadhi, most probably, or must have been an elder contemporary, we don't know. Vajaspati Misra, who lived in Mithila, he wrote Bhamati Tika. So also Shankara, based on Shankaracharya's Brahma Sutra Bhashya. And Panchapadika, written by Padmapada. So, and Panchapadika Vivarana Prameya Sangraha. Of course, that's later after Ramanuja. The point is, all these dialectical works which overemphasize the Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya. Brahman is only reality, the entire world is Mithya. Even Mithya, the word Mithya also was misunderstood and misrepresented by opposing schools. It's a very interesting period of time. So within almost 300, 400 years, so many dialectical works were written, overemphasizing again the dialectical polemical aspects of Shankara's commentary. Totally, even now, if you go to many places in India, they mostly fight over dialectical works. They don't. I tell you something interesting. I had this fortune or misfortune, depends on how you interpret it. Where I was teaching in India, some young students, brahmacharis, they were chanting this. Gadistam Tamega Bhavani Ashtakam. It all ends with, oh, Divine Mother, you are my only refuge. This is how it ends. So this fellow next day asked me why Shankaracharya did not care for bhakti. I asked him, do you remember what you were chanting yesterday? Gadistam Tamega Bhavani, which in our own temple, some of our devotees chant. That is Shankaracharya's writing. And how do you say that? So I tell you, so very often people without proper understanding and also by virtue of belonging to the particular denomination, just like I would say, in Western world, you find different Ceylon Pentecost, Indian Pentecost. If you go to India, you can find many such denominations. Because they belong to that, so they do that. Not because they believe in it, but they belong to that. It's not that they believe such ideas, so they belong to that. No, rather they belong to it, so they believe in it. That's the thing. Importantly. Because they belong to that cult or the group, denomination, so they believe that. Not because they are ready. So this happens frequently among Indian scholars also. So different interpretations of the Bible. People may not even read the entire King James version, but still they read something little and they make too much of it without reading Aquinas, Augustine or somebody. So that's a different thing. What I mean to say, so there are people who are very superficial. Okay, they belong to the denomination, so they believe in it. Not that they believe in it, so they belong to the denomination. The other way around. This frequently happens in India. But there was no violence at all. Nothing of the kind. Mostly they wrote books and they argued, and this went on for a long time. Till in 16th century, one great man emerged in Shankaracharya's tradition. He's called Madhusudana Saraswati. He was perhaps the greatest dialectician of his times. He was a master of logic, different schools of logic. So he wrote one book which actually follows Shankaracharya's commentary, Gudhartha Deepika. You can see a translation of Gudhartha Deepika in Ramakrishna Mission's publications. He brought back the devotional element and he integrated. He gives a very integrated, and he himself was a great devotee. He begins his work with an invocation, a prayer to Lord Krishna. He says, the little boy Krishna who is playing flute, who is wearing a small, tiny, yellow cloth, little child, Krishna. I can't think of a sweeter, greater, or more sublime aspect of God ideal than this little flute playing Krishna, the child Krishna. This is how he begins. And this is also a great follower of Shankaracharya, who wrote a very dialectical work called Advaita Siddhi. And this man wrote a commentary on the Gita, following Shankaracharya's footsteps. He brought back into his book the devotional elements that were forgotten in Shankaracharya's Gita commentary. The whole history went. So that was almost 800 years after Shankaracharya's passing away. Thank you.
David Milstein.
Thank you, Swami.
Hi, Swami. Isn't there a conflict between a work of a life of hard work, even if done with a very spiritual attitude and devotion and humility? Isn't there a conflict between that and parts of your life that are more contemplative and meditative, simply because work done on that level can be exhausting?
Yeah. You know, in real life, if one practices dedicated work with humility, with a sense of surrender to God, if one practices that ideal, naturally he will become contemplative. It's an important thing. The sense of humility, the sense of non-attachment, the sense of sanctity and sacredness with which we do our everyday work, that attitude will automatically lead to a contemplative mood for everyone. And you find people who do that naturally develop an inclination to read spiritual books. And automatically that leads to contemplative mood, contemplative nature. It is inevitable. It's important.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I understand.
Swamiji, I have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, historically, these challenges to Shankaracharya that, in a way, underplayed the devotional aspects of his work and writing, and of that the part that devotional life plays in his philosophical system. And I've always wondered whether or not some of the,
Somehow it was not audible. Bobby, can you
Sorry.
repeat the last sentence somehow?
the underplaying, the understating of Shankaracharya's devotional aspects in his system. I've often wondered whether or not that was mere error or purposeful or some resistance to the majesty of the universal ideal represented in Shankaracharya's work.
Yeah, right. You know, it's true. It's a very important and interesting question. There was no deliberate effort to ignore or underplay Shankaracharya's devotional elements in his books. Rather, as you said, the majesty of his philosophy, the transcendental importance of his philosophical ideas occupied their minds so much that it got overemphasized. And in the case of Ramanuja and Madhva, in both their histories you find, their teacher was overemphasizing the dialectical aspects. Brahman is only reality, everything is, unreal, that aspect. And if you read their life, they openly questioned their teachers right in the middle of the class when the class was going on. This happened literally in the life of Ramanuja. Ramanuja did not question, but he shed tears. Madhva was more a man of a violent nature slightly. So he revolted against it, against his teacher. So I can give one interesting example that could be the right answer to this question. In Sri Ramakrishna's life, you find Sri Ramakrishna's Advaita Guru was Totapuri. Puri is one of the 10 monastic goddesses. The Totapuri himself took many years to get this enlightenment. For Sri Ramakrishna, only 3 days were enough. And then, of course, Sri Ramakrishna realized this. Then still after that, Sri Ramakrishna used to do devotional singing, sitting in front of Divine Mother Kali in Dakshineshwar temple. Clapping his hands, Sri Ramakrishna used to sing devotional songs, great devotion, completely immersed. The Totapuri made fun of him, are you making chapatis? Because with the both hands, if you do this, it's how they made chapati in Punjab and other places. Totapuri was coming from Punjab. So Totapuri actually made fun of Sri Ramakrishna, are you making chapatis? And Sri Ramakrishna, of course, this Totapuri later on left the place after learning the greatness of bhakti. He stayed for a little longer time. Eventually, he left Dakshineshwar only after learning about bhakti. The point is, Shankaracharya himself was writing all these devotional poems, devotional works, devotional poetry he wrote. Totapuri was not aware of this. Totapuri is a classical example. He was a great man. He was a spiritual person, but somehow he was obsessed with this idea that Brahman is only reality. So very often, many of the Advaita scholars who are more given to dialectical arguments, there's a Vada. I mean, it was very intellectual pastime in those days. So they were given to this intellectual entertainment, taking up one statement from the commentaries and arguing different views, different interpretations, and so on. It's a common thing. Totapuri must have been a person who was obsessed with the dialectical aspect of Advaita. So that's the only explanation why Totapuri made fun of Sri Ramakrishna, who was doing bhajans in Dakshineshwar temple, and Totapuri himself was a distant disciple and follower of Shankaracharya, who wrote Divine Mother is only refuge. That's how each verse ends in Bhavani Ashtaka, 8 verses. So you can see this interesting contrast. But I think that era is gone completely. The era of this argumentative, dialectical culture, an intellectual culture is given to arguments and dialectical exchanges. That era is gone. Nobody bothers about that. Today is a more friendly, more holistic way. And not only that, many of the great monks who joined our order from places where Ramanuja and Madhva were dominant, they all actually were Advaitins. I have not come across anyone who was not an Advaiti. Who actually were born in families with a strong non-Advaitic roots. So this frequently happens. So thank you for the very interesting Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you for the response. David's hand is up again, possibly.
Most welcome, most welcome. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
David, do you have another question?
Yes, so I have a two-part question.
Yeah.
It's it seems from what we read that Advaita came before Bhakti in the Hindu scriptures, that there were realized souls who realized Advaita on the path of Jnanamarga before there was the path of Bhakti, from what we read. And secondly, we hear that we're in the Kali Yuga. Does that mean that there were many illumined souls who had realized Nirvikalpa Samadhi? They were like on every corner, sort of a thing. Is that what we're to understand when we hear that we're in the Kali Yuga and it's a dearth of spirituality, but back in this Vedic age, there were many illumined souls, everywhere all the time?
Yeah, the demands of Kali Yuga are different, very different from the demands of earlier eras. You can just imagine. So even going back to history of spirituality in Western tradition, think of the desert fathers, for example, classical examples. They were just like the Avadhutas, these wandering mystics of Vedic times. They were not different. The desert fathers, for example. I mean, they were so self-denying, self-sacrificing. So they were examples of extreme types of devotional temperaments. So one thing I do want to say, if you are talking about scriptures, we should admit that maybe the Upanishads predate many of the classical works on Bhakti tradition, no doubt. The Bhagavata, in its present form, is somewhat modern, but Bhagavata in another form, and in a shorter form, did exist long before even Shankaracharya, but not become popular, not become well known. That's true. And again, there are Narada Bhakti Sutra, Shandilya Bhakti Sutra. There were important works on Bhakti schools in Bhakti related to Bhakti schools. So, as a system of philosophy, the Bhakti school became popular only after the coming of Ramanuja, Vallabha, Nimbarka, Chaitanya, and others. Though the great works on Bhakti, the philosophy of Bhakti did exist much earlier as a cult of Bhakti school. Actually, it's really got well established only with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. So philosophically, he's indebted to the Madhva tradition. Chaitanya school claims that the heritage comes from Madhva tradition. Madhva himself was a great devotee of Vishnu or Krishna. So that is true. I think the all-conquering nature of Advaita philosophy became so well known that it became the highest standard of intellectual and spiritual pedigree in India, and they overemphasized the dialectical aspects, completely ignoring, giving only secondary importance to devotional aspects. That could be the reason.
So it does seem that the Jnana Marga came prior to the Bhakti Marga, or at least was more popular. But secondly, were there a lot more lumen souls back then because it was a greater age?
Excuse me, there were illumined souls in the Bhagavata Purana.
But
Vishnu Purana.
many. But were there many? Like were there hundreds and thousands of illumined souls back in the Vedic?
You can find the entire Bhagavata Purana, Vishnu Purana, and other. There are 18 Puranas, which are called Mahapuranas, the important one. The 18 Upapuranas, the secondary Puranas, 36 works, huge works. Old, many shelves you need to fill them, huge books. So those books are full of stories of great saints and bhaktas and Bhagavata Purana itself is so many. Mahabharata is full of such saints who and got enlightenment through bhakti. It's a very ancient system. It became a compact cult-like form, cult, like these, let us say, the evangelical or the Ceylon Pentecost, the Assemblies of God, different cults. So they strongly uphold, claim to uphold certain things. No, they may not have read the original books or anything. Don't ever imagine that those who claimed Ramanuja school, the community, all of them have read Ramanuja. No, it's it takes a long time to study Sanskrit, grammar, and so on. But they claim to belong to that. There were many such. There were also great scholars who studied. So it became a cult that began with Ramanuja in 12th century, 11th, 12th century AD. That's true. But great bhaktas, great devotees always existed for thousands of years ago. So, for example, this, the Chaitanya ISKCON system, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, that is come from Bhagavata Purana. It's a Mahamantra. It comes from the ancient works. They made it. It's not their creation. It's an ancient way of chanting, actually. Remember. So it didn't begin with them. It didn't begin in 16th century with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is much more ancient. So, okay. So thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Swami.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And I have some important announcements now. Please remember. That is, there will be no foundational text of Indian philosophy class on May 28 due to the Memorial Day program, May 29, 2023 at the Vedanta retreat, Ulima. So please remember, we have our annual retreat in Ulima on May 29. And also we have a program on May 28, Sunday. So there will be no class on Indian philosophy on May 28. Next foundational text of Indian philosophy class will be on June 4th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Okay. The next Bhagavad Gita class will be on June 2nd, Friday, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. the hotel. Thank you.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaskar.